In many ways, the Fire Emblem series is extremely similar to the Shin Megami Tensei series. Sorry, let me try that again. Nobody knows what I'm talking about. In many ways, the Fire Emblem series is extremely similar to the Persona series. They're both long-running JRPG series from the 90s, they both introduce a diverse and colorful cast of characters each installment, and they both have a suite of spin-off games. You know, funny thing, someone else must have noticed these similarities at some point, as there was actually a crossover game between these two series. Except my sources are telling me it was a crossover between Fire Emblem and something called Shin Megami Tensei? Whatever the hell that is. One of these spin-offs, Persona Q, features gameplay familiar to fans of the series, with a few twists thrown in. Moreover, it features characters from the entire Persona series, Persona 3, 4, and 5, coming together to fraternize and fight a new evil. New characters are introduced, but the game strike a good balance in giving most of the screen time to the returning characters. Because let's be honest, no one cares about Rei and Zen when you have the likes of Junpei, Yukari, Yosuke, Chie, Ryuji, and An in the same room together. What would they talk about? Who would be friends? Who would be rivals? Wow, what an obvious home run idea for a game, pleasing existing fans of the series while introducing characters that newcomers might not be familiar with in a fun way. Fire Emblem Engage is the newest installment of the Fire Emblem series. It features gameplay familiar to fans of the series, with a few twists thrown in. Moreover, it features characters from the entire Fire Emblem series. Sorry, there's no joke that time, it actually does. Coming together to fraternize and fight a new evil. New characters are introduced, but the game strikes a good balance in giving most of the screen time to those new characters. Because let's be honest, who really cares about Marcelica, Sigurd, Leaf, Roy, Lynn, Erica, Micaiah, Ike, Lucina, Corin, or Byleth when you have Alir? Who cares about any of those losers? What would they talk about? Who among them would be friends? Rivals? I don't know. They don't utter a single word to each other. Wow. How brave of them to subvert this completely obvious home run idea in favor of something wholly original. I hope it was worth it.
I'm the Fire Emblem.
Let's discuss Fire Emblem Engage.
Rise from 1,000 years ago, shaking off a hazy dream. Meet the flower who cares for everyone, the rising force of black and steel, fighting in the desert sand. Meet the snow that sweeps across the fields, the light and dark restore skies tonight. Heal the ones and learn from yesterday. You calling out their names, crossing paths again, 12 are coming through, but us from another place. Do you remember me? Memories of red and blue, reigniting you, bear your fate and roar, free yourself forevermore, here and now.
Emblem
Bonds
Engage!
of fire connect us, love provides, protects us, like the heroes from the pages, like the stories of the ages. Bonds of hope unite us, shining on to guide us. Skies above embrace the beauty, the time is now for you and me. Fire Emblem Engage is frustrating. Not just for the point made in the intro, but for many, many other reasons. Forsooth, dear viewer, this was one for the gameplay boys. We have not known triumph this great since Fates in all of its mechanical glory. Were it so simple. I wish I could sit here and tell you that Engage is a triumph, an innovative masterpiece on the level of Fates. I wish I could tell you that you shouldn't care about its narrative failings because the gameplay is just that damn good. I wish I could ignore all the problems I felt about Engage on this most recent playthrough. And I wish the smile didn't slowly fade from my face as I played and came to the sobering realization that Fire Emblem Engage is not as good as I remembered. In fact, it's not good. And trust me, saying that out loud causes me mental anguish because this was the one lauded by all for its gameplay. The one I thought people were idiots for criticizing because don't they see how great it actually is? What a fool I was. In a world full of idiots, am I perhaps the biggest idiot of them all? Conflicted is not a strong enough word to describe my feelings on Engage because I thought I loved Engage. Now I think I hate it. So, in an attempt to compartmentalize my feelings, let's begin with what I think worked. Fire Emblem Engage is a deeply silly game for reasons clearly intentional.
Time to get this party started!
Zappy! Divine One! You look so shiny when you sweat!
Give me that potato! I am so sorry!
I love you.
Hiya, papaya!
Hiya, papaya? Huh.
But it's also silly for reasons unintentional.
But I wanted to be a good dragon.
As opposed to what? As opposed to what?
Forgive me!
No, we must help the divine dragon. No, we need the wings.
Even the core conceit of the game is very silly. Characters from past games of the series are now godlike figures called emblems, housed in rings that give other characters superpowers when they speak aloud the magic words,
Emblem Engage!
It's a lot. And then to have all that, treated as dead serious, and try to have these emotional, heart-wrenching scenes like, oh my god, my mother just died, oh my god, Marth. What do you think of that, Marth? As with all things comedic, your mileage may vary, but speaking for myself, a lot of it worked. I could easily see people thinking the Comedy and Engage is cringe. To that, I would say, as someone who thinks they're funny, and I mean goddamn hilarious, I find that the line between comedy and cringe is razor thin. Often, things that are cringe are very close to being comedic, and things that are intended to be overtly comedic sometimes fall flat into cringe territory. But in the comedic process of finding out what works and what doesn't, that line will inevitably be crossed many times both ways. And now I believe it was the Greek philosopher Testicles who advises us, kill not the part of you that is cringe, but the part of you that cringes. See? Was that joke funny? Was it cringe? I alone can't know. It's entirely subjective. My advice? Memento cringe. Remember, you are cringe. Engage is set on the continent of Elios, and I think the nicest thing I could say about it is that it's totally fine. It's comprised of 4 nations, each themed after the 4 seasons, in case you forgot. winter, spring, summer, and autumn. It's executed confidently enough that I don't hate it. The look and the music is clear and distinct between each nation, but there are a few things that are very confusing to me. So, you have the surface level. Each nation is themed after a season. Serenes is spring, Brodia is autumn, Elusia is winter, and Somme is summer. Okay, yeah, that's great. But follow me here. You go a layer deeper, and okay, Serenes is spring, so fittingly, flowers are incorporated into many of its designs. The characters all have French names. Chloe, Louis, Céline. So we're going spring with a sub-theme of French. Then you see Elusia, winter theme, darker colors, blacks, purples. But then all the characters are named after flowers? Hortensia, Rosado, Hyacinth. Wouldn't that make more sense for the spring-themed area? And then you go to Brodia, autumn. Characters are named after gems. Diamant, citrine, jade, lapis. So just pick a lane. Are we doing cultures? Inanimate objects? I don't know. I have no idea. Because then we go to Somme and all the characters have Italian names. Fragado, Tibera, Bude, Pandreo. But then you have a character who is clearly Mexican. Damn. Maybe I do hate Engage. No, it's not true, damn it. I can say, without any reservations, I do genuinely like the character designs of Engage. Actually, especially characters like Panette, because it's just so quirky to have this one Mexican-themed character that completely stands out. I know this is a point of contention for many, because it's not an exaggeration to say, Engage has some of the most eccentric designs of the series. And that's not even counting all the weird sci-fi elements. To show why I enjoy Engage's design, I'd like to do a little experiment. Let's say I take these characters from Engage and cover their faces. They're still easily identifiable. Bright, distinct colors from one another, distinguishing characteristics. Look, she has balls. Let's try the same thing with 3 houses. Look, I'm fully aware that this is a bad faith cherry-picked example. They're wearing school uniforms, but my point is this. Give me more Mexicans. On that note, evidently, I guess we're done using portraits in favor of the actual 3D models of the characters. Man, this is another thing that I wasn't sure if I liked or not. Because the portraits and face in 3 houses are so beautiful, and I'm not even kidding, I still think this is the funniest thing ever. But in Engage, you can now do this. Which is maybe equally as funny. The models in Engage are a huge step up from 3 houses in terms of quality and expressiveness, so I suppose it makes sense to feature them in this greater capacity. But there is a certain charm that's lost when going from bespoke pieces to 3D models that, by necessity of being a 3D game, were going to be used anyway. I mean, just look at Metal Gear Solid. Huh. Guys, I think I hate Engage.
No! Back, foul demon of cynicism!
Because I can confidently say I enjoy a lot. Okay, well, two of the new gameplay mechanics added in Engage. The first is how they've gone about differentiating unit types. The usual stuff is there. Cavalry units can move further, flying units can fly. But what they've done with infantry units is interesting. I think the one that most accurately captures the essence of a unit is the Thief. Their covert ability doubles avoid bonuses from terrain, meaning that if they go on a forest or similar tile, they are basically untouchable. It leads to gameplay that perfectly encapsulates the Thief fantasy. Being able to sneak through enemy lines and disrupt their movement, assassinate a key target, all while being safe from damage. It's so strong, in fact, that I feel like the other infantry abilities were balanced to counteract it. The backup skill is by far the most abundant among infantry, and it allows them to execute chain attacks if they're in range when their ally attacks. Chain attacks always have an 80% chance to hit and always do 10% of a unit's max HP, meaning that eventually these attacks will whittle down any unit. It's an incredibly powerful tool in the player's hands as well, and makes it so many units are still relevant even if they're not the stars of the show. Magic infantry units have the mystical skill, which negates avoid bonuses units get from terrain. It's not quite as interesting as backup or covert units, but it serves as a nice counterbalance to units with high avoid, like slippery thieves. So already, there's a lot of good examples here of giving unit types a bit more depth. But there's one more that accomplishes something I never thought possible. They made healers actually interesting. In the past, the gameplay of these units mostly consisted of, as you might imagine, healing. Maybe sometimes they use a special staff, but that's about it. In Engage, healers are given the Chi Adept classification, which I'm sure can also describe many Scrabble players. When Chi Adept units are at full health, they can use the skill Chain Guard, blocking any one hit at a minor health cost. This allows for risk-taking and positioning units, as you know at the very least, they're guaranteed to be safe from exactly one attack. You know, it kinda reminds me of dual guarding from Fates, but surely any relation to Fates is purely coincidental. Healers also have access to fisting weapons, which normally don't deal much damage, but have added utility in that they have weapon triangle advantage over magic, bows, and knives. This is the second gameplay mechanic that I enjoyed. The weapon triangle works completely different in Engage than in any other Fire Emblem game. In previous games, the weapon triangle... well, I actually couldn't tell you what the weapon triangle does without looking it up. I know it's good if you have an advantage and bad if you have a disadvantage. But it's very vague and the specifics change almost every game. Sometimes weapon level affects it, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes the weapon triangle isn't even there at all. Engage's iteration puts to rest any possible confusion. It boils down the weapon triangle to its simplest form. As always, swords beat axes, which beat lances, which beat swords. But if someone is attacked with weapon advantage, they're put in a broken state, leaving them unable to counterattack when next they're attacked. It's incredibly powerful, it's incredibly clear, the benefits and downsides are immediately apparent. It's great.
We 13 emblems stand against you with our allies.
Now, it'd be impossible to talk further about Engage without first discussing fan service. With every game in the series having representation in Engage, it was important to make sure each was given its fair shake. Nobody wants to feel like their favorite game in the series isn't getting the respect it deserves. At its best, fan service pleases existing fans and intrigues newer fans to find out more about characters like the blue-haired twink. Which one? That is the question. At its worst, bad fan service can be damaging, portraying characters in a negative light or making superfluous additions. That said, the fan service in Engage is serviceable. Each returning character has a masturbatory cutscene introducing them as they do their iconic pose and music from their gameplays. They say their iconic lines. Ike says,
Fight for my friends.
which I'm pretty sure he only says in Smash Bros. Marth says,
みんな見ていてくれ
which, again, weird that they chose a line from Smash Bros. Credit where credit's due. A lot of effort went into these lines of dialogue because the way it works is each character says the lines of the emblem they're using.
If my love for Deirdre is a crime, please punish me, and only me.
If this love is a crime,
Now, using my rudimentary algebra skills, assuming each emblem has about 4 lines of dialogue in combat, there are 37 playable characters, including both forms of Aleer, and 12 emblems. This equates to almost 1,800 lines of dialogue, just to have every new character say the iconic lines of every old character. Is this completely unnecessary? Yes. They could have just had the emblem themselves say the line for a similar effect. Are there countless combinations that you would never conceivably see unless you went out of your way to see them?
I fight for my friends.
Yes. Would their effort have been better spent elsewhere? Yes. I think so. But regardless, I would say though that it was something I enjoyed, this fusion of old and new. I couldn't help but appreciate the dedication on display here, ensuring that no matter who you're using, they will say those fucking lines.
I fight enemies.
I fight for my friends.
Each emblem also brings with them a remixed version of a map from their game, rife with nods and references to that game.
Do not swing timidly without resolve. You must genuinely try to kill
Wait
me.
a second, I recognize that line. Perhaps the most pleasing aspect to fans of the series is the way the music is handled on these maps. In all seriousness, I could have cried the first time I heard the music on Corrin's map because of how amazing it is. I didn't, but I could have. There is a lot going on here. It would have been all too easy to just literally copy and paste the music from Fates, call it a day. It'd still sound pretty good. It would have been all too easy to just have a remix version of the individual track that plays on the original map. Instead, Engage opts for a completely new arrangement, a medley of all of Fates' most recognizable tracks. Fates' soundtrack is flipped on its head. You go from having these slow, melancholic pieces to
Time to open up shop.
and it's honestly pretty freaking sweet. Not even mentioning, of course, how there's actually two versions. The normal version and the badass version. For comparison's sake, here's all the tracks being referenced in Engage's rendition.
Yeah.
It's the best kind of fan service, not just, hey, look at this thing you remember, but hey, look at this thing you remember, but better? This is just the music for one map. They don't all get this kind of love, but I still think there's something special going on with the tracks on these maps. It's especially fun hearing the new arrangements for the older games in the series, when the music mostly consisted of beeps and boops. As for the music original to Engage, I don't have much to say about it except that it's good. Many of the tracks are sure to get those ass cheeks clapping. Getting back to the emblems, it is fascinating to see how they translated to Engage in their gameplay functions. Some of them were fairly direct translations of certain aspects or mechanics from their games. Corrin has the skill Draconic Hex. Yup, it's exactly the same as how it is in Fates. Pairing up is a crucial mechanic in Fates where, among other things, it can block additional attacks from enemies. So Corrin has a skill in Engage that mimics this function by blocking chain attacks. Great idea! Dragon Veins are essential mechanic in Fates where they change the terrain of the map in a variety of ways. So in Engage, Corrin can change the terrain of the map in a variety of ways. If it wasn't obvious, I think this is the most faithful recreation of a character in their game's mechanics, and I don't think that's just my rabid Fates fanboyism talking. For some of the older games, the transition to Engage is not quite as smooth, but I think they deserve a lot of credit for how they handle it regardless. My favorite example of this by far is what they did with Lyn. A game like The Blazing Blade is not nearly as mechanically intensive as a game like Fates, so naturally, there'd be less to draw from when bringing it to the more modern design space of Engage. So what did they do? They just made shit up. In Engage, Lyn has the ability to clone herself. Perhaps it goes without saying, but this is not something Lyn can do as a normal human girl. I think it shows how little they had to work with, because what this is a reference to her critical hit animation in The Blazing Blade, something purely aesthetic. And well, I guess my understanding of this was that it was Lyn moving so imperceptibly fast that for a brief, fleeting moment, she gives the illusion that she's everywhere at once. I never really considered that she might, in fact, be cloning herself 4 times and attacking all at once, but according to Engage, yeah, that is what's happening. They took maybe the one thing they had to work with from The Blazing Blade and made something of it, despite it being a little silly, which is commendable. And also fucking stupid. But of course, the most standout aspect of the emblems are their big, flashy ultimate attacks. For all intents and purposes, these are what Engage is all about. Engage attacks take some aspect of the character and crank it up to 11 as the camera dynamically shifts around and they say some badass line.
I am not about to stop here.
The way everything comes together with these makes for what I feel are some of the best 3D animations the series has ever seen. That extends to normal battle animations as well. Look, I hate needlessly dumping on 3 houses, haha, just kidding, I love doing that, but if you compare some of its animations to Engage, well.
You fought well. Ready yourself. Sleep now.
Rapid fire on things that aren't as interesting. Weapon forging. Pretty okay. You get ingots primarily from clearing levels which are used to upgrade weapons. You can also donate exorbitant amounts of money to increase the amount of ingots you get for clearing levels. This sucks. I want to spend my money on cool things like buying weapons. Engraving weapons with emblems is fun. An emblem's personality is reflected in the stats they add to a weapon. Ike adds a lot of damage and a lot of weight. Get it? Because he's big and strong. Sami is cute. Look what I named mine. There's no weapon durability in Engage, which is good. Higher tier weapons weigh more, lowering their usefulness, which is bad. Weapon weight is counteracted by a unit's build stat, making for additional considerations with which unit can best use which weapons, which is fine. Fates has a much more interesting take on no weapon durability though, with no weight and each weapon tier having unique drawbacks. I don't know how long this video is so far, but I anticipate it's about to get a lot longer, because I'm done talking about the stuff I liked in Engage. The gloves are coming off.
I am the Divine Dragon.
Let's start with the most obvious. Why on God's green earth would they bring back all these characters and not have them interact in any meaningful capacity? It's such an obvious thing to do that I have to wonder why they didn't. Characters who would otherwise have no right talking to each other, coming together to tell their stories, have funny interactions, or even expand upon aspects of themselves. Like, some of these are right themselves. I could be like, dang, my dad died, that shit sucks, man. And Corrin would be like, ha, you think you've got daddy issues? That one's silly, of course, but here's one that could have been something more. Sigurd and Leaf, like, oh, hey Leaf, my nephew, I literally died before I could watch my son grow up. Could you tell me more about him? Do you think that's a conversation we could have? We can only speculate on their reasoning for not doing this. What we got instead are these watered-down support conversations that every returning character has with every new character. Look, I really don't mean to be disrespectful here, because using my rudimentary algebra skills again, there are 12 returning characters, 36 new characters, and a full conversation between these characters is about 8 lines. This equates to around 3,500 lines of dialogue. They're all very well voice acted, and some of them are completely fine, but I can't help but feel these 3,500 lines of dialogue are completely worthless. As I've said, a complete conversation between 2 characters is about 8 lines. There's nothing substantive here. There are fully fleshed out support conversations between the new characters exclusively, which feels like a complete slap in the face when all of the beloved characters from the entire series are right over there. Now obviously the ideal scenario would be one where Engage has it all. Fleshed out interactions between all of the returning characters, the new characters, and combinations of the two. But that's not realistic, as it would nearly triple the amount of dialogue in Engage. As it stands though, it seems like they prioritized the wrong things. Here's the thing though, I really want to give them credit for doing this because, legitimately, it is a monumentally bold decision to snub the returning characters like this in favor of things original to Engage. In an alternate reality where the characters of Engage are as deep as interesting as the characters of Three Houses, and the plot of Engage is some gripping narrative instead of trash, the decision to focus more on Engage's characters might have been hailed as some brilliant, subversive decision. But that is not the reality we live in. For the most part, the characters in Engage are shallow, the plot is painfully generic, and the emblems are kind of just there. Those who care about the narrative aspects of Fire Emblem are not pleased with Engage, and fans who want to see more of their favorite characters are not pleased given how little screen time they have. It's the worst of all worlds. Keeping in mind that it's easy to criticize without knowing the whole story, here's my idea for what Engage should have been. Fire Emblem Engage is not an ordinary Fire Emblem game, and it shouldn't be treated as one. We don't need a full cast of new and original characters like usual. We have everything we need right here. Maybe we can still have like 6 major characters in Engage to justify a new plot, but most of the characters will be returning characters. We can still do the Fates things where we introduce a character and their 2 retainers, except it'd be with characters we already know. Like the very start of the game, here's Marth, he comes with Jagan and Sheeta. Or here's Corrin, she comes with Xander and Ryoma. Ironically, 3 characters from each game would total 36 characters, the same amount of new characters in Engage. With that established, we'd have the story actually revolve around these characters, instead of them just being a plot device in a story about good dragons and bad dragons and who gives a fuck. If we're going to be a game with this many opportunities for fan service, let's fully commit, not try to be 2 things at once and fail at both of them. All that being said, there is very little enjoyment to be had from the returning characters in a narrative sense. There is very little enjoyment to be had with any narrative elements in Engage. I don't think talking about the plot and depth will yield anything of interest because there's just nothing there. There's nothing even close to being anything. The villains are about as one note as they can possibly be, as is Alir. The supporting cast serve as vehicles for the emblem rings and little else. Mind control is a key plot point. It is beyond contrived to do this in general, let alone with the number of times it's been used in the series. Like, oh, sorry, you see, all that evil stuff I did? It has literally nothing to do with me. I was mind controlled.
Wait!
It feels like a story written for kids. By kids. Which I usually wouldn't have issue with. After all, Fates is my favorite Fire Emblem game, and its plot makes Engages look like Shakespeare in comparison. Any of them, really. They had 3 shots at it. The reason Fates is my favorite, though, is because it is damn near a perfect video game, strictly looking at its gameplay mechanics. Level design, pair-ups, classes, skills, weapons, everything unique to Fates works in tandem to make a gameplay experience that I seriously have trouble finding any major flaws with. I wish I could say the same about Engage. I have often seen Engage compared to Fates, some going as far as to call Engage Fates 2. It's a comparison to which I have but a simple reply. Were it so. I can see why the comparison is made. Just for fun, here's all the similarities I found playing through Engage again. A dragon is the main character, though Alear doesn't actually turn into a dragon unlike Corrin. Point to fates on that one. The protagonist's mother dies early into the plot to a hooded figure using dark magic to zero emotional impact.
Look out!
But please, don't leave me! Mother!
The main villain is the protagonist's father, who the protagonist kills to zero emotional impact.
This wayward creature was another of my children.
Sleep now!
Engage blast!
Engage. You are my child now. This can't be.
The protagonist fights against their sibling, who is being mind controlled.
Your sister.
Oh, how I wanted to find you. How I wanted to kill you.
I'll never forgive you.
The protagonist dies, goes to the afterlife where they talk to their dead sibling, who convinces them not to die. Man, if I had a nickel for every time that happened.
I must have died protecting Vale. Vale? Why are you here?
Things didn't go how I wanted them to. And now it seems I've died. Rise up! Corrupted!
Die!
Big brother.
No.
Yeah.
Alear's personal skill is the same as Camilla's, to massive emotional impact. As well, there are a multitude of skills lifted from Fates. Important characters are recruited alongside their two retainers.
No.
Corrin,
I am Emblem Corrin.
knock off Camilla, but also Camilla is in both games. No weapon durability. A character who looks like a little girl, but is actually 1,000 years old. Though to be fair, this is pretty much a series staple at this point. Speaking of, this next one deserves its own talking point. Someone clearly has an agenda over at Intelligent Systems, because this is 3 games in a row now where a major character is a little girl with bare feet. And it's gotten out of hand in Engage because you know how sometimes they use artwork to emphasize key moments in the plot? Somehow, it was decided that a close-up of Vale's feet should be one of these moments. And not just once. Twice. My main takeaway from these similarities is that I wish Engage was more like Fates where it matters. To better frame this discussion, let's divide the gameplay of Fire Emblem into 2 layers. The tactical and strategic layer. Full disclosure, I 100% stole this idea and terminology from XCOM. The tactical layer of Fire Emblem consists of the actual act of playing through a level, positioning units, attacking enemies, using skills, and so on. The strategic layer, then, is pretty much every other decision you make outside of a level, reclassing units, equipping skills, buying and upgrading weapons, and so on. Both the tactical and strategic layers of Fire Emblem Fates are nearly flawless, both seamlessly complementing and strengthening one another. I feel the tactical layer of Engage is good, while the strategic layer completely fails on every conceivable level. From this point forward, comparisons to Fates are intentional and unavoidable. It is the standard by which modern Fire Emblem gameplay must be measured. Engage attacks. The big it factor with Engage, and by far the most interesting gameplay addition. The most over-the-top action the series has ever seen. Sigurd's Engage attack that pierces through a line of enemies. Ike's that attacks in a small area of effect. Celica's that lets you teleport across the map. I've said in the past that this moment in Fates was legitimately the closest I've come to orgasm playing any of these games. Legitimately the closest I've been to orgasm playing any of these games. But the first time you get a good Lucina Engage attack off comes pretty damn close. Commence Operation Bukkake.
I challenge my fate.
One for me!
You're ours now! Get one free! Me too! Another! Me too!
A weakness.
This one's mine.
Allow me. I underestimated you.
But therein lies the issue. You do feel like a genius when you get the most use out of an Engage attack, so it pains me to say, but the novelty wears off fairly quickly. For my money, Sigurd has the most fun emblem attack to use. It likely has the highest damage potential of any Engage attack, and it is satisfying and powerful to kill multiple enemies at once. You get Sigurd in Chapter 4, and it's everything I've described, with the addition that his passive lets any unit move absurdly far, allowing them to line up a perfect Engage attack. But that's just it. Chapter 4, and you've already seen the extent of what Sigurd will ever do. The most optimal use case for his Engage attack is immediately apparent and always the same. From Chapter 4 to Chapter 27. Line of enemies, Sigurd's attack. Line of enemies, Sigurd's attack. Line of enemies. You get the picture. With no changes to the attack throughout the entirety of the game, it becomes extremely repetitive. The same is true for many of the more impactful emblem attacks. Byleth is probably the worst offender, as his Engage attack will only ever be used one way, to give 4 allies extra turns. It's powerful, sure, but it's not very exciting. It only has this one way it can be used. The unchanging nature of the Engage attacks is just a small piece of Engage's failure on the strategic layer. Again, keeping in mind that it is easy to criticize and any old jackoff can say things, here's my idea for what could have been. It goes back to the idea of the emblems having supports with one another. Maybe once they'd obtained a high enough support level with one another, their Engage attacks would alter in some way, adopting characteristics from each other. For example, you play through the game gradually building up support between Sigurd and Roy. Roy's Engage attack leaves a 3x3 patch of fire after use. So maybe once Sigurd and Roy have a high enough support, Sigurd's Engage attack now leaves behind a trail of fire in an area behind him. This might be a somewhat unrealistic expectation, as it would result in combinations between each of the emblems, but I think something more was needed to have the Engage attacks hold my interest the whole way through. It's especially disappointing as some of the less impactful Engage attack like Roy's fall off quickly, arguably becoming worse than just a normal attack. A system like the one I described would at least open up new avenues for these attacks and expand upon the sandbox aspect of the game. Now there is something like this in place, but for now, suffices to say the additional effects you get are relatively minor or blatantly uninteresting. So to take a step back for a second, the biggest new mechanic of Engage are the emblem rings, each with a variety of passive skills that in some way reference the characters they're based on. Some are stronger, some are weaker, but for the most part each of them are powerful tools, with much of their power concentrated in their Engage attacks. It's not an exaggeration to say that this is the most powerful the player's army has ever been in any Fire Emblem game. The question I want to pose is this: as power level increases, how do designers, in turn, keep a consistent level of challenge and engagement within the game's levels, so that it doesn't just become this repetitive song and dance? Fates answers this question with a very apparent and goddamn elegant solution. Most levels have a unique mechanic associated with them, be it innately or through the use of dragon veins. Even with your units at their most powerful late into the game, levels still have these unique mechanics and all the additional considerations they bring with them. Engage answers this question with all the subtlety of a chimp with a machine gun. A common trick used in Engage's levels to artificially increase challenge is something I've come to affectionately call ATFE, 1,000 fucking enemies. ATFE, ATFE, ATFE. Line of enemies, Sigurd's attack. I don't think the issue itself is the enemy density, but rather how often they do this. Because while it is completely bereft of any shred of creativity to just throw 1,000 enemies at you, especially compared to Fates' solution, it does test how effectively you can use the emblems. It makes for these seemingly impossible scenarios, surrounded by enemies, navigable only by clever use of the emblems. Don't get me wrong, ATFE gets old very quickly, but I can at least see where the developers were coming from. Because how do you keep things interesting and challenging when you have to design a map around multiple emblem rings, all of their passive skills, as well as their game-altering emblem attacks? You don't. It's impossible. I don't know, throw 1,000 enemies at them, they'll figure it out. ATFE is but a means to an end, a way to pressure the player so as to make for varied combat scenarios, forcing the player to think on their feet. It's a crucial aspect to get right in Fire Emblem maps, where the game quickly degenerates into draw enemies out, kill them, rinse and repeat. I would consider 16 of the 41 maps in the game to put some sort of external pressure on the player that's not just ATFE. Of these 16, 12, one of them are some form of ransacking thief/bandit. One of them is a strict turn limit. To put things into perspective, I would consider 21 of the 42 maps available in Conquest to have some sort of external pressure. Of these 21, 3 are some form of ransacking thief/bandit, and 4 are strict turn limits. The other 14 are all unique and creative ways to apply pressure. Various ways in which NPCs need protecting, chasing a BBW through a maze, etc. It feels strange to say that the whole concept with Fates was to be creative in its level design because, ideally, all the games should be, but as the series has continued from Fates, it really feels like that's not the case. Engage is no exception. The few times it does try to vary things up either completely fall flat.
No, 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 no! Wait!
Looks like my summer vacation is over.
Or are invalidated by the emblem rings. My favorite example of the latter is Chapter 20, which centers around Gris, a major antagonist throughout most of the game. He has Celica's ring, which as mentioned, allows the wielder to teleport across the map and deliver a devastating magic attack. The main idea behind this map is that it is mostly obscured by Fog of War, meaning you won't know when or where Gris will strike. In addition, he can strike and retreat back into the shadows in the same turn, making for a tense, frightening game of cat and mouse. At least in theory. Because here's the issue if you think about how to approach this map, even a little. There are 2 ways to clear Fog of War, a torch or the Illume Staff. In the previous chapter, Micaiah was returned to you. One of her passive skills reads, grants staff range +5 and area of effect +1. The range of the Illume Staff is 7, +5 is 12. It is no exaggeration to say that using this staff with Micaiah will literally light up the entire map, and oh, he's right there. I don't understand it. Did they not think anyone would use the staff whose actual only purpose is exactly this? There are 2 Fog of War maps in the game. The first teaches you that Micaiah can clear Fog of War, and the second teaches you that the levels in Engage are a f***ing joke. All this to say, perhaps ironically, I think the levels that work best are the ones in which you lack most of the emblem rings, namely Chapter 11 and Chapter 17. Chapter 11 presents the rare scenario in which you have no emblem rings to start. The bad guys stole them all. Given how powerful the rings are in the player's hands, it's a moment that feels appropriately devastating.
Stop it! Just stop!
As the enemies now use them to hunt you down with extreme prejudice. A glimmer of hope comes later in the map in the forms of the emblem rings Lyn and Lucina. Limiting you to only 2 emblem rings gives them a chance to shine, and using them efficiently to clear out the whole map is one of the most satisfying moments in the entire game. Because it's challenging in a good way, there are a lot of meaningful choices to make revolving around Engage's sound core mechanics and manipulation of the enemy's use of the emblems. It doesn't devolve into ATFE and the cacophony of Emblems times 12. Chapter 17 is enjoyable for almost the exact opposite reason. All of the emblem rings are in play, 6 on your side and 6 on the enemy's side. This is the last time the enemy has this many emblem rings, and while it is fun to fight against them, their AI is very easily exploitable, so perhaps it's for the best. There's only so many times I can watch Celica teleport right into the middle of my army, or Sigurd charge ahead of everyone only to die, before it stops being funny and starts being sad. Commence Operation Bukkake.
Taking the lead.
Quite strong.
But because it's impossible to give praise to Engage without finding several flaws in the same breath, they took an odd approach with the paralog levels. I do think that on the tactical layer, they're good maps despite their overuse of ATFE. As stated, they're maps from previous games, so unless they deliberately chose to recreate the worst maps of each game, it'd be a pretty hard thing to get wrong. My biggest disappointment with them is their complete lack of scaling throughout the game. If you come to the conclusion that you'd like to return to a map later in the story, when you have more emblem rings, which, to reiterate, will happen because of ATFE, you've already completely invalidated the map. Since they don't scale up the enemy stats as you progress through the story, coming back to Paralog a few chapters after it becomes available will trivialize it. Now, they must have predicted this to some extent, because bafflingly, the only safeguard in place to prevent this is this little suggested level indicator. This is so worthless, it may as well not say anything. Suggested. Advanced Class, Level 7. Tell me, what do you think this means? I mean, individually I know what these words mean. Advanced Class means using a Master Seal on a Level 10 starting class. Level 7 means Level 7. But the problem comes when you put it all together into some vague suggestion. Advanced Class, Level 7. Does it mean I should have a Lear at an Advanced Class Level 7? Is it an average of my whole army? Do I need to bust out the calculator? I reclassed one of my units and now it says they're level 1. How does that factor into this? A map is most fun when there's a challenge to it. Don't leave it up to me to decide when a map will be most fun to tackle. Had these maps scaled throughout the game, it would have ensured that at the very least, they would provide a challenge no matter when they were played. It's most baffling because 1, they figured it out in Fates, and 2, they figured it out in Engage. The DLC maps scale with the player, ensuring that no matter when they're played, they will provide a challenge. Engage's handling of the paralog maps are a prime example of how a failure on the strategic layer, leaving it up to the player to decide when to play a map with no scaling, can be harmful to the tactical layer, the map in question becoming trivial, and it is but a prelude of things to come. My frustrations with Engage's strategic layer begin, quite literally, before you even start the game. I don't mean to nitpick, but this is something that must be confronted. For you see, there are actually 2 versions of Engage, the patched version and the unpatched version. For now, suffice it to say that the patched version fixes a few of Engage's problems by dramatically increases the amount of resources you get. My biggest problem with this is that it straight up gives you a ton of resources for free when you start the game on the newest patch. You have no say in the matter. The same is true if you have any of the DLC installed. Now it seems reasonable to say that the definitive version of any video game is one where all the content is present, be it from updates or downloadable content. Therefore, it seems like a perfectly reasonable and acceptable thing to do to boot up Fire Emblem Engage on the newest patch with all of the DLC installed, but doing so gives 33,000 gold, 5,000 bond fragments, 1 of each permanent stat boosting item, 1 of each steel weapon, 1 of each silver weapon, 10 steel ingots, 20 silver ingots, and much, much more. It's to the point where I would just rather avoid it all by playing the game unpatched and without any DLC, which is maybe for the best. The general philosophy with Engage's DLC seems to be more equals better. It nearly doubles the amount of skills in the game while adding a staggering 7 new emblems. Fan favorites from the series except for one that I have to mention. I am beyond appalled that the filth known as Fire Emblem Heroes has managed to worm its way into a mainline Fire Emblem game. That is all. I'm not sure I would call Engage plus its DLC the definitive version of the game. Tacking on 7 blatantly overpowered new emblems on top of the existing 12 makes things a bit messy to say the least. There's fun to be had here, especially with the new maps, but I much prefer the tighter experience the base game has to offer. With all this in mind, ideally, you start the game unpatched and without any DLC. Select New Game, choose what difficulty you want to play on. I enjoy maddening. And then, another boneheaded decision. We're what, 30 seconds in? You wouldn't know it, but the first time through the game you are forced to play with fixed level ups, i.e. not random, you know, the way it is in every other game in the series. As if they're saying, hey dum-dum, you're not smart enough to decide. Trust us, it's more fun when level ups are completely static and predictable. You unlock the option for random level ups, the way God intended, after you complete the game once. If it wasn't obvious, I strongly disagree with this decision. The fact that you're not even given the option of what system you want is frankly insulting. Random level ups have been a staple of the series' identity since the first game. They're fun. Let's say we both use a character with a 25% chance for their strength to increase on a level up. You use the character and find them totally worthless, not increasing their strength at all within 5 level ups and decide to bench them. I use the same character, except this time I get lucky and have their strength increase on 5 consecutive level ups, turning them from a trash unit to a godlike murder machine. That's exciting. We've literally just witnessed a 0.00098% occurrence, and it's completely changed the way we both look at the same unit. This aspect is completely lost with fixed level ups. You and I both use the same character, and we're more or less guaranteed to have identical stats on them. You lose what makes units unique. You lose those fun moments where you completely high roll and level up every single stat on a character.
Nice.
Or hell, I'll even say those fun moments when a character levels up and they get no stat increases. Because this is hilariously unlucky, and whenever it happens, I pretty much just sit there and stare at the screen with a smile on my face. So, intelligent systems, I'm on my hands and knees at this point. Please, never do this again. Don't make me play through the entire game only to find that my playthrough was tarnished. If you can find it within yourself to look past all this bullshit, eventually you are introduced to the Somniel, Engage's hub area where most of the strategic decisions take place. There are a number of activities to do here, but thankfully, they're not a crucial part of the experience unlike 3 houses, and they can largely be ignored. After much deliberation, I think I finally pinpointed my main issue with Engage's strategic layer. There is basically no progression. You're never really building towards anything exciting. To give perspective, Fates. From the outset, you are making decisions that will drastically affect your playthrough. Even something seemingly innocuous, like choosing Corrin's gender, will have major gameplay implications, let alone choosing their class and growth rates. You progress a number of systems just from the simple act of playing the game. Obviously, characters are leveling up and gaining stats. You're gaining weapon ranks the more you use certain weapons.
You're strong.
You're gaining skills and switching classes to gain more skills. You're pairing units up and building their support levels, which seamlessly transitions into unlocking additional levels in the form of recruiting child units. There is constant growth while playing through Fates, and it remains extremely gratifying even at the later stages of the game as you try to optimize your unit's builds. Engage is the complete antithesis of Fates in this regard. You don't train weapon levels, Engage attacks remain static the whole way through, you gain about 2 skills per character, you complete a paralogue only to gain stronger versions of the same boring skills. Supports do something, but it's nothing as apparent or interesting as birthing a child. Make no mistake, while the emblems are sidelined by the narrative, for better and mostly worse, they are absolutely the stars of the gameplay. To start, there are 2 ways to gain skills in Engage. Getting to level 5 in an advanced class, and the main way, inheriting them from emblems. A unit equipped with an emblem already has access to their skills. Hey, it's me from the future here with a slight addendum to what I just said. So what I said about 5 seconds ago was, a unit equipped with an emblem already has access to their skills. And that's kind of true. Obviously, you have access to these skills here, called sync skills. So you equip an emblem and you get these skills no matter what. But let's take a closer look. You gain new skills with an emblem the higher your support with them is. So let's see with Leaf here. Chloe has a bond level of 2 with Leaf, meaning she only has access to these skills. Jean has a bond level of 3, meaning that he has access to Vantage, as shown in the sync skill section of the menu. Easy enough to understand so far, right? Okay, here's where it gets stupid. So using the example with Leaf, intuitively, you would think that a unit equipped with an emblem would have access to all the skills shown here, but that's not the case. Celica has the skill Tome Precision, which gives hit and avoid when equipped with a tome. So if I go over to my stats here... Wait a second. Why doesn't it say I'm getting a boost here? Is it already added to my stats? No, it's not. You don't gain the effects of stat boosting skills from emblems. But wait a second, that's a lie, because let's go over to Corin here. She has the skill HP plus 15, and clearly Yunaka is getting plus 15 HP. So what's going on here? Well, actually, this plus 15 HP is just part of the stat boost that emblems give as units obtained higher bond levels with them. It just so happens to line up with Corin's HP plus 15 skill, because if we go to an emblem like Marth, he has a skill that gives plus 30 avoid. But I'm not getting plus 30 avoid here, I'm only getting 8. For you see, these are the stats Marth gives, and that plus 4 speed is what's contributing to that plus 8 avoid. So that leads to situations where you have a skill like Roy's sword power, where you see it and think, oh wow, Roy gives so much attack, but you don't actually get the effects of that skill. You can test this very easily. With a max bond rank with Roy, you would think I would get plus 10 attack from sword power 5, giving me 49 physical attack when I equip him, right?
Roy, I'm with you.
Wrong. You need to inherit the skill to have any effect. And remember when I said a unit gains about 3000 SP in the entirety of a playthrough? This means that skills like sword power 5 may as well not exist, because you will never get them. Anyway, a unit equipped with an emblem already has access to their skills, but they can also inherit skills from other emblems. To inherit an emblem skills, a unit must first build support with the desired emblem, either through using them, or, more commonly, by spending bond fragments. Bond fragments are gained through the game's achievement system, which consists of tasks you would complete just by normally playing the game. Clearing chapters, defeating enemies, etc. It's mostly frivolous, but whatever gets those good brain chemicals flowing, I guess. Yeah! You can also spend bond fragments on this gacha-like system, where you get rings that represent characters from all the games. It's also mostly frivolous, and I only bring it up to show this clip where I got the best one on my first try. But for the most part, bond fragments are spent to build support with an emblem. After the desired level of support is reached, the unit must then spend SP, increasing in cost the stronger the skill is. SP is a resource which units slowly accumulate as they fight and defeat enemies. And when I say slowly, I mean slowly.
Don't forget your loss.
A good skill likely costs around 2000 SP. If you're lucky, a unit will gain about 3000 SP in the entirety of a playthrough. This means that at best, they'll be able to inherit one good skill and one lower level skill, which is just as well as units can only equip 2 skills anyway. It's a system that encourages thoughtful use of SP, as it is so limited, and also a system that is entirely invalidated with playing on the newest patch. It's one of those things I mentioned that the newest patch fixes. tasked with fixing slow SP gains, intelligence systems, sporting an abundance of intelligence, but lacking in wisdom, decided to tip the scales in the complete opposite direction. On the newest patch, there exists this well, whose main function is to spit out SP like it's nobody's business. What was once a scarcity of SP that had to be carefully spent is now an overabundance, where you can easily get any skill you want with SP to spare. It's a decision where I'm once again left wondering what their intention was. Although its usage is optional, thankfully, it feels like a gross overcorrection to the SP system and the band-aid solution at best. Rather than do the hard work of actually adjusting SP rates or balancing out skill costs, they just threw in some hastily constructed mechanic, and it's a disappointing approach to say the least. Or maybe this was their intention from the start, to make it shit. Who can say? Each emblem has about 4 to 5 skills that can be inherited from them, totaling 55 unique skills. There are 85 skills counting skills from classes, and 110 adding on skills from emblems that cannot be inherited, and technically 123 if you count emblem attacks as skills. But I want to focus on the 55 skills that can be inherited, as they comprise a big part of Engage's strategic layer. So let's say that for the purpose of building a character, Engage has 55 skills. Fates has 109, and while the old adage is true, quality over quantity, Fates has both quality and quantity. Engage has neither. Let's take a closer look. Of the 55 unique emblem skills in Engage, 24 of them are the most bland, generic stat boosting skills imaginable. Skills that boost any of a unit's stats: strength, avoid, luck, and skills that boost stats when using a certain type of weapon. A skill like Axe Power can be powerful, sure, but I would very much struggle to call it an interesting design when there's only 55 skills to work with. And then you have slots that are completely and utterly wasted. Something like Sword Focus does not need to exist. Swords are, by far, already the most accurate weapon type. There is very little reason you would want to boost your accuracy with the sword even more. It's as if it's there by obligation and not on the merit of whether or not it would be a worthy inclusion. So barring the 24 boring-ass skills, there are 31 skills with unique effects. A majority of them are niche or have questionable use cases. Resonance, Pair Up, Silence Ward, Demolish, Headlong Rush, Vantage, etc. This wouldn't be a problem in and of itself, but there are a few outliers that are generally good on everyone, almost completely eliminating the desire for other skills. Canter allows for an unprecedented amount of tactical freedom, giving a unit 2 free spaces of movement after they act. Put it on a few units and you effectively invalidate the fundamental positioning aspect of Fire Emblem. It is ridiculous how broken this is. Why would I ever pick one of those niche skills that may or may not be good when I could just slap Canter on a unit and I know it will be good? In my most recent playthrough, knowing how strong Canter is, I wanted to avoid it. That only really left one other option. Speed Taker. Any unit that wants to attack and kill enemies, which is most of them, will massively benefit from having plus 10 speed. It is the most efficient SP to stat ratio in the game, and it really is hard to justify picking anything over it, besides Canter. So you go from a promising sounding 55 skills to mess around and experiment with, to 2 skills. And it's not as simple a solution as just boosting SP rates. The problem still remains that most of the skills aren't worth considering. This is why I think there needs to be restrictiveness, or it just becomes this homogenized mess of simply picking the best skills. Fates does not have this problem. You want lethality on Odin? Too bad. You'd have to plan that out from the beginning, choosing a female Corrin with a ninja reclass and marrying Odin. You want an Odin with lethality and trample? Too bad. Literally impossible. Go birth a child if you want that. But of course, this is only a fraction of the skills in Engage. What about the skills you get from classes? Let's talk about reclassing in Engage. We'll start off very simple. To switch classes in Engage, you need a second seal, which are easily obtained from the item shop. You then need to have the necessary weapon proficiency. Characters have innate weapon proficiencies highlighted in blue, giving them a higher weapon rank in a class that uses that weapon. This is actually a pretty cool, albeit minor way to differentiate characters, so good job on that one, guys. More weapon proficiencies are obtained by building support with emblems. This in itself presents a major pain in the ass. Once you have a ring, getting the weapon proficiency from them is as easy as spending a few bond fragments. The availability of the rings is the issue. Let's say I've looked at all the classes, and early on, I've decided for sure that I want to make Chloe a martial monk. You get Chloe in Chapter 4. The earliest you can reclass her to a martial monk is Chapter 14, once you obtain Byleth, since he is the only emblem with fisting proficiency. I understand lore-wise it wouldn't make sense for anyone else to have fisting proficiency, but like, throw me a bone, man. During the interim, from Chapter 4 to Chapter 14, you can do nothing to progress towards this goal. No building fisting weapon rank, no gathering skills from other classes, nothing. It is a binary system. Either you have the ring and you can change class, or you don't and you can get fucked. Then, of course, there's the story sequence where all the rings you had get taken away in Chapter 11. So if you wanted something from Marth, you better kiss his ass goodbye, because you won't be seeing him for another 11 chapters. Once the required weapon proficiency is obtained, the unit can then freely switch into any class requiring it. Each class comes with a corresponding skill. You cannot inherit a class's skill. If you obtain a class skill, then switch classes, the previous skill is lost. Also, they're not very good to boot. The best class skills, such as series staples Sol and Luna, are locked to specific characters who have unique classes. Pretty lame. This means that the primary incentives for switching classes are the differing weapon levels and growth rates between the classes. It presents the same problem as inheriting emblem skills. Since reclassing is so easy and the cost is low, why not just pick the best class? Since skills don't matter, why not? Statistically speaking, there is a best class. One that has growth rates where they matter, that has 6 movement, access to 3 weapon types, one of the few good skills, and can fly over terrain. It's Wyvern Knight. It's Wyvern Knight and it's not even really close. Now you don't have to play optimally to have fun with any of these games, but it feels bad knowing that, objectively, if you choose any other class besides Wyvern Knight, you're probably making a poor choice. This isn't a problem in other games of the series like, I don't know, Fire Emblem Fates? In a single playthrough of Fates, every character cannot be every class. It's simply not possible. Individually they can, but it would take specific circumstances. Like for argument's sake, let's suppose Wyvern Rider was the best class in Fates. Only like 5 characters would be able to become Wyvern Riders, and it would be a journey throughout the game building up to becoming a good Wyvern Rider. Getting the necessary supports, building weapon ranks, getting skills from other classes, etc. So that covers the basics of reclassing in Engage. It sucks. And if you can believe it, it's not even the part about it that pisses me off. For that, we have to go deeper. Here's something truly tragic I discovered in my most recent playthrough. Follow me here. I was playing perfectly normally when I made the seemingly harmless decision of reclassing Chloe to an axe fighter. Here was the rationale. Axe fighters have a high strength growth rate compared to Chloe's base class of Lance Flyer, so I figured to better balance her stats, this change was warranted. So I got her an axe proficiency and it was off to the races. Completely understandable, right? Unbeknownst to me, I had just thoroughly fucked over poor Chloe. You see, I reclassed Chloe when she reached level 12, for no particular reason other than I thought it was a fine time to do so. This reset her level to level 1. Kind of interesting. So that means she would gain experience really fast, right? I mean, that's how it worked in every other game in the series. A low-level character gains experience faster than a high-level character. It makes sense. Come to think of it, in every other game, when you reclassed, you stayed at the level you were at, which also makes sense. It would be needlessly confusing to say you're level 1 when you actually aren't level 1. Right, Engage? Although the game tells you Chloe is level 1, for the purposes of experience gain, she is level 12. This might not sound like a problem, but it prevents a massive roadblock. Units need to be level 10 to promote to advanced classes. Since I just reclassed Chloe, again, a perfectly reasonable and acceptable thing one might think to do, she is now level 1, gaining experience at the reduced rate a level 12 unit would. At this rate, it would take eons for her to reach level 10. That's 9 levels where she's not gaining the increased growth rates advanced classes offer. Not to mention that once she does promote, it will take even longer to reach level 5 to gain the class's skill. It is beyond stupid that it's this easy to hinder a unit, and I'm someone who gets intimate with these games' mechanics. Imagine someone who's not. What chance would they have to not make this mistake? So the strictly correct thing to do, I found, was to get Chloe to level 10 in her base class and immediately promote her to an advanced class. This applies to all characters. The fact that you even have the option to reclass units before they promote is straight up misleading in 99% of cases. Again, you don't have to play optimally to enjoy the game, but having the knowledge that you're severely hindering yourself if you don't immediately promote units, or if you even think of reclassing before then, is harmful to the experience. Why even bother experimenting? Why even bother playing Fire Emblem Engage?
Nah, I'm just playing. We cool.
There's also the added consideration that switching classes changes a unit's type. Aside from having an effect on the battlefield, some unit types have additional effects when paired with certain emblems. This is another thing where, at first, it sounds like this would provide a wide range of interesting and varied permutations to play around with. But let's take a closer look. Many of these effects are just flat stat boosts. 10% damage from mystical units using Celica's skill, plus 5 defense for armored units using Ike's Engage attack, plus 10 avoid to Lynn's clones for flying units. Boring, but whatever. There's no other way to say this though, some of them are just poorly designed. Mystical units get a damage boost equal to 25% of their magic when using Sigurd's Engage attack. How interesting! This opens up a whole new avenue of attack. What's more, a mystical unit can just use the Flame Lance, which scales off their magic, and in conjunction with Sigurd's skill Lance Power, we have something cooking here. There are no mystical units that can use lances. Well, not a problem. All units can use the weapons of their emblem, so even if someone can't wield lances, they'd still be able to use Sigurd's Rider's Bane and Brave Lance. A mystical unit with high magic wouldn't exactly be doing much damage with these weapons, since they scale off strength, but still, something is better than nothing. Plus, you could always upgrade the damage of the emblem weapons. Intelligent systems, please. Never make a system again that even remotely resembles the one in Engage to upgrade emblem weapons. I know I'm asking for a lot, but please. There exists a way to upgrade the stats of emblem weapons. It is not like upgrading a normal weapon, which is a totally reasonable and sane process. To upgrade an emblem weapon, you need crystals. To get crystals, you need to grind the most monotonous, soulless, prefabricated maps the series has ever been disgraced with. You play through a series of 3 maps to maybe, get enough crystals to have a fourth of the amount needed to upgrade one stat on a weapon. There are no words strong enough to describe my hatred of this system, and it's not as simple a fix as bumping the numbers up. Playing through these putrid maps even once is not something I would wish upon my worst enemy. Having to play through supplementary maps to get a resource to do something that you would think would be as simple as just upgrading a weapon is not a very good system. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Here, I just thought of a better system right now. Give me some crystals after I beat a story map. There you go. Infinitely better than what they went with. So if you ignore the fact that emblem weapons can be upgraded, as any sane person should, they become obsolete almost instantly. Meaning that plan to use Sigurd's Engage attack with a mystical unit will never happen. Hey, it's me again with another slight addendum. Sigurd's Engage attack can be used with a sword or lance. That's great! To get the most use out of Sigurd's Engage attack with a mystical unit, magic scaling weapons are a necessity. So either the Flame Lance, which has already been ruled out, or the Levin Sword. There are no mystical units that can use swords. Except one. Selene has access to a unique class that is both mystical and has access to swords, meaning that this very narrow case is the only way to get any value from this feature. And even then, Selene has a magic growth rate of 25, so it's not exactly going to be the powerhouse one might want. I stand by what I said that this is an example of a poor design choice, but it's not quite the smoking gun I thought it was.
One strike will decide it all.
There are only 2 units who I think have designs that warrant building around them. My sweetheart Corrin, who changes what terrain she makes, differing between every unit type, and Lucina, who can completely block damage for allies the same type as her wielder, which incidentally is probably the most broken thing in the game. I am done talking about Fire Emblem Engage. My critique of Engage is not that it's not Fates. That would be stupid. But rather, when it comes to modern Fire Emblem design, Fates got so many concepts right, and it's frustrating to see a regression with Engage. I feel as though Fates was the last time the series really pushed the envelope with what a Fire Emblem game could be, to massive success. Clearly it's something Intelligent Systems realizes, given that when it came time to make a game that goes heavy on the gameplay mechanics, they took much inspiration from Fates. But they failed to fully grasp the underlying reasons of why Fates systems work. What is it that makes reclassing satisfying? What is it that makes gaining skills satisfying? Or playing through a map satisfying? Why is it that after thousands of hours of playing Fates, I still want to go back, and after 3 playthroughs of Engage, I never want to touch it again? Core gameplay elements can't be neglected for the shiny new mechanic. There's some good with Engage, but it's ultimately an experience that feels hollow. If this was one for the gameplay boys, I'm apprehensive.
Someday, in the future, our paths may cross once more. Our bonds can be reforged time and again. Whenever you desire, you need only say the word.
Engage!